Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you this afternoon. And welcome to this event. My name is Anna Stemport. I'm the founding co-director of the Atlanta Global Studies Center at Georgia Institute of Technology. And this is the Atlanta Global Studies Center Symposium Race Beyond Borders keynote address by Dr. Sheila S Walker, a celebration of the Global African Diaspora. The Race Beyond Borders initiative is a coalition of Greater Atlanta area higher education institutions, nonprofits, and the Atlanta Mayor's Office of International Affairs with the support of the web publication Global Atlanta. We aim to create a collaborative, diverse, multi-institutional and multidisciplinary space for a global conversation on race and a public-facing scholar, activist, civic community network. We explore the legacy of the Atlanta Civil Rights Movement and how that translates into the present to affect positive change in race relations around the world. We investigate how global movements inform and influence the local conversation. We connect scholars, artists, like the one we have featured in today's program, practitioners, policymakers, and turn a conversation into action. We collaborate with many organizations, and all organizations and everyone who's been involved in co-sponsoring and co-organizing today's program event are on our website, and I believe the link is being posted into the chat box. You can learn more at the Atlanta Global Studies Center website /Race Beyond Borders. And with me today is Dr. Tony Lemieux, founding co-director of the Atlanta Global Studies Center at Georgia and professor of communication at Georgia State University. And before I hand it over to Tony, let me just thank Diana Wren-Rapp at Georgia State, Shebnam Oskin at Georgia Tech, and Seus, who's in the background. And they've been the ones who've really been organizing and connecting everyone through a week of wonderful programming at the Global Studies Symposium. Tony.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here and welcome everybody. We've had quite a week, and I can't think of a better way to top it off than to have Sheila Walker with us this afternoon. The focus of the symposium has really been to think about, the sort of vision of global resilience and really, leaning into the sustainable development goals and thinking about, the sort of interconnectedness and complexity. And so I am thrilled that we're able to explore that today through Sheila's work. Before we begin the program, I just want to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items. Please do recognize that the session is being recorded and keep your microphones muted throughout so that we can minimize any background noise. We'll have a moderated discussion, and then after the discussion, we'll have a time for a Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, please do use the chat feature and type them in so we can make sure to incorporate those. And then as we get into that period, you can use the raise hand function as well. And so let me now introduce today's moderator. So Dr. Pushpa Parekh is a professor of English and the director of African Diaspora in the World at Spelman College. She's a poet, a professor, and a scholar. She's the recipient of the Spelman Presidential Scholarship, Service and Teaching Awards, and recently the 2019 Gerard Manley Hopkins Award, an annual recognition by the International Hopkins Society in Ireland. Her poem, Peace, received the West Coast Tagore Festival Prize at the international contest held by the Vancouver Tagore Society in the summer of 2016. She's published 4 scholarly books, the latest as a journal special issue editor of Frontiers and Frameworks in African Diaspora Teaching and Scholarship, in the spring 2020 issue of the Journal of Commonwealth and Postcolonial Studies. She's been a Spelman faculty member since 1990, and it is an honor today to have both Sheila Walker and Pushpa Parekh here. So Pushpa, let me turn it over to you.
I knew I was going to do that. Sorry. This is Pushpa. Thank you, Tony, for the wonderful introduction. I just want to say that this is a wonderful symposium too. I have been attending some as I could, and I was at the morning sessions, and they were just wonderful. I won't go off on a tangent like I tend to do, but I want to introduce our wonderful keynote speaker, Dr. Sheila Walker. So let me just, I have a few notes, so I'd like to make sure that I get it, though I know Dr. Walker for a long time, since we were together with the ADW program, and she came as a distinguished professor to Spelman. So, and we have reconnected lately. She's been a speaker at our ADW program events, and I'm just amazed by the work that she does. So I just want to say that Dr. Walker is a cultural anthropologist and documentary filmmaker. She has done field work, lectured, and participated in intellectual and cultural events in most of Africa and the global African diaspora. Her goal is now to educate the public about the global African diaspora. Her book, African Roots, American Cultures, Africa in the Creation of the Americas, has a companion documentary, which is titled Scattered Africa, Faces and Voices of the African Diaspora. Her latest book, and I will just read the English translation since I'm not so good with the, I'll just say, knowledge from the inside, Afro-South Americans speak of their people and their histories, which is in Spanish and Portuguese, features chapters by Afro-descendants from all the Spanish-speaking countries in South America. Her most recent documentary, Familiar Faces, Unexpected Places, a global African diaspora, was shown at the United Nations as the 2018 Black History Month program for the UN International Decade for People of African Descent, 2015 to 24, and was sent for showings at UN information centers in the Americas, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, and Europe. Dr. Walker was a professor of anthropology with an endowed chair and director of the Center for African and African American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, then distinguished visiting professor and professor of anthropology at Spelman College 2002 to 4, and director of the African Diaspora and the World Program 2004 to 5 at Spelman College. So I'd like to welcome heartily Dr. Sheila Walker to this event. We will get started with a few discussion points or shared in some senses. I think we will try to limit our storytelling tendencies, but we do enjoy that kind of exchange. And I just want to ask if Dr. Sheila Walker could start us off with introducing the topic and some misperceptions of the African diaspora around the world. Perceptions and misperceptions, I would say, because I think the good and the bad sometimes tend to overlap.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm really thrilled to be here. And, it's kind of like being back at Spelman, okay, in the pioneering African diaspora in the world program. I'm sure that Spelman, I don't know the statistics, but without knowing the statistics, I'm convinced that Spelman was the first historically Black college to decide that they were going to anchor students' knowledge in the African diaspora as opposed to Western civilization. Why not look at oneself through one's own eyes rather than through someone else's? So reversing Du Bois's double consciousness. I'm really pleased to be invited by the Atlanta Center for Global Studies, particularly when I saw those words together, celebrating the diaspora. I did a keynote at the United Nations for the Remember Slavery program, and the title they gave me was Remember Slavery, Celebrating. And I thought that word doesn't fit, okay? But celebrating the diaspora, that does fit. And that's my perspective. I think we probably know that most of the African diaspora didn't get created voluntarily. The recent African diaspora of the last 2,000 years has mostly, but not exclusively, been involuntary. And, one has a choice of focusing on the oppression or on the creativity in spite of the oppression, and that's my choice. So let's see, I have some basic questions for everyone who will have seen the documentary. And I can talk a little bit about what I think is special about the version of it that I choose to show. But my basic questions are going to be, what was surprising? What did you learn? Why didn't you know it? So what? And now what? Ideally, I like to think that first of all, the fact that there is a global African diaspora in the United States, we've all kind of gotten this Planet USA worldview, as if we're the only people in the world. And I'm always amazed when African diasporans talk about us and the African diaspora, as if it were somebody else and not us too. So, that always shocks me when I hear that. So I'm really looking forward to having your responses and your questions about those issues. So my goal was to show places where we don't assume that the African diaspora is, to show similarities and differences. For example, in India, Africans were rulers. Well, that didn't happen in the United States, okay? That's a really different kind of experience. So I think it's really important to decenter the Atlantic world as the African diaspora. And if you're gonna look at the Atlantic world, well, then you need to look at the whole thing. We in the United States are a little too United States-ocentric. There are many people who think that we're the majority of the global African diaspora. Wrong. English is the language of the African diaspora. Wrong. So those are some basic misperceptions, right? And my worldview was formed by Joseph Harris's map of the global African diaspora that was published, I think, in 1980. And he did a lot of lectures with the map. And I went to all the lectures and I kind of memorized his map, and it had all these arrows leaving Africa, and they didn't all come across the Atlantic. Okay, they went across the Mediterranean, they went across the Red Sea, they went across the Indian Ocean. So I was fascinated, and my goal ever since has been to follow those arrows and to see who's at the other end of those arrows and what are they doing. And what I have found generally is that when I get there, they recognize me and they say, oh, she's one of us. So that's my introduction.
That's wonderful to know. And just to put in a little bit of my experience coming to the US and trying to understand how the construction of race works, because I didn't think of race much when I was growing up, but there are other terms we were more familiar with, ways of both uniting and dividing us. But I think definitely the connections that you're making, I did as well when I came here. So, the recognition of just looking at people and saying, yeah, reminds me of my mother or my father or somebody in my family. And that was amazing. And I think it's important for us to talk about those connections and to recognize that there are reasons why some of us don't know our own connections and histories. So your film really brings to the forefront that these kinds of ways in which all across the world, the African diaspora is relevant and is really something that we live. This is our lived experience, even if it's not a scholarly study, studied in a scholarly way. And I think maybe we as scholars and practitioners of certain arts can bring in some of these kinds of connections to the forefront, which you are doing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you want to, I don't know if there's a clip that you want to show us, just so we can kind of get a sense of these connections that you're making? I think there is some. Diana is going to show.
Most of the people who laid the foundations of the modern Americas were of African origin. Of the 6.5 million people who crossed the Atlantic during the first 300 of the 500-year history of the modern Americas, only 1 million came from Europe. 5.5 million people were brought from Africa during the inhuman commerce in human lives known as the transatlantic slave trade. By the end of the 19th century, 12 to 15 million Africans had been scattered throughout the Americas. More than 200 million African descendants now live throughout the Americas.
I think another topic that we wanted to really focus on, and you show very well, is this idea of technology, which seems like such a specialized area today, and most of us are considered to be outside of that as innovators. And Africans have been the first technology experts, I would say, from the kinds of things that they invented, the tools and all of that that you talk about. Could you give us a sense of that innovative aspect of technology that Africans were masters of in some ways?
Yeah, I love to talk about that. I also love to talk about the demographics that preceded the technology. And I had a conference in 1996 at the University of Texas, and I got money from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And after my conference, I was mad about the miseducation I had been given. So the demography, the demographics of the Americas, why don't we know that Africans were the majority of the people in the Americas during the majority of the history of the Americas? That's huge. I mean, we're told, oh, Europe created this. Yeah, but the majority of the people weren't European. How did they create this? And the technology. If we learned anything about the process of enslaving of Africans in the Americas, we learned that they didn't bring anything. I remember a professor explaining to me that an African was a tabula rasa, a blank slate. I didn't have any kind of evidence to disprove what he was saying. Given my limited education, I only had a PhD. From the University of Chicago, which I was told was the best university for anthropology in the United States. But I didn't know about all of the technology Africans were brought to the Americas specifically because of their skills and knowledge of. So why wasn't I told that? I mean, it's not that it's not available to be known, just like the demographics. One of the things that I was told, I was really miseducated. Carter G. Woodson, head of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the person who created African American History, Black History Month, week that became African American History Month. He wrote a book in 1933 called The Miseducation of the Negro. And there I was being miseducated, end of the 20th century. But we need to know that, for example, rice culture in the Americas, well, that rice did not come from Asia. That rice has a different scientific name from Asian rice. That rice was domesticated in West Africa. Gold culture in the Americas. Gold culture in the Americas, once there was the genocide of the indigenous population all over the place. Europeans wanted the gold. They came looking for El Dorado. There it was, but they didn't know how to extract it from the earth. So what did they do? They went to what the Portuguese call a Costa da Mina, the Gold Coast, and recruited forcibly these Akan-speaking people who knew gold culture, and they call them negros minas, mining Negroes, such that now in Colombia and Ecuador, there are African descendants whose family name is Mina, mine. And they don't necessarily know that their name refers to the knowledge that their African ancestors brought to the Americas, that transfer of technology that we're not told about.
Did you know that the word Mina, name Mina, is also in Indian languages? Mina Kari means working with gold. So there's another connection that we definitely have to pursue. Of course, the mining of gems, and all of that is related to the way in which the cities came to India and with their expertise of gems, and working with gems, in addition to military warfare and other technology areas that you can explore. But this is very interesting. So I just want to say, because I know there's a clip that I think Diana will show us of the technology piece.
Cool.
I may have jumped a little bit. I may have gone before the clip showed with the questions, but we can show the clip if it's there. This is, of course, there's a lot that we can explore through the work that you have done. I just wanted to maybe reflect about this ways in which understanding, and we teach that in our courses as well, the understanding of diasporas can connect us and create solidarity, which is very much needed, I think. So could you comment a little bit about that and how you see your films working towards that end?
Yeah, well, one of the, we here in planet United States, right? We can't imagine that there's another world of the African diaspora on the other side of Africa. I worked in Somalia, and I remember standing on the beach in Mogadishu looking east and thinking, wow, I don't know anything at all about what's over there. So then I had to go to India and visit several Afro-Indian communities and go to Turkey and go to Indian Ocean Islands just to see, and to see connections, like the fact that that Africans were involved in the same kinds of technologies on both sides of the continent. That's pretty interesting. And that it has that this African presence has left traces in the names of human beings who probably just think it's just a name, as opposed to a name that tells you something about the history. In some visual I showed an instrument called a malunga in Gujarat, and an instrument called a berimbau in Brazil. And a berimbau player from Brazil said, oh yeah, I know that instrument. And when I showed the juxtaposition of the two in Brazil, this really amazed me. There was an Afro-Brazilian who said, oh, I know that Indian guy. I said, you know that Indian guy? You mean from the other side of the world? He said, yeah. He was part of a performance group. They went to Kolkata and they performed with this Indian group from Gujarat. And there they are playing exactly the same instrument, a Bantu instrument, obviously. One person from Brazil, one person from India. That's pretty amazing.
Right, and it's very clear that these influences across continents and wide expanses of places is really something that we carry through, and we don't even know they exist until we make these connections very formally, like you have done with, I think, creatively, but also formally through our education. So when you said miseducation, I was really thinking about these lapses, in our learning. I think maybe I feel like it was done very carefully. I don't know how much to assign to just leaving out things that people didn't consider, those who were building up these instruments of knowledge, things they didn't consider of importance, but are of importance to us, of various areas of the diaspora.
And it's exciting to be around now and to be doing this research and to be finding all this information. Joseph Kizerbo from Burkina Faso, major African historian, said, Africa is like Osiris. It's been cut into pieces and the pieces have been scattered over the earth. And it's up to us to put the pieces back together. And he was talking about Africa and the colonization of Africa by Europe, such that there are countries in Africa that speak English, French, Portuguese, Spanish. But I don't see it that way. I mean, I don't disagree with him, but I see the scattering of Africa as a metaphor for the African diaspora. And Osiris's consort, Isis, Queen Isis, with her magical powers, went around and found each of the pieces of Osiris and buried each piece where she found it. To me, that's a great metaphor for the diaspora, and the putting together of the pieces is essentially recognizing these connections and saying, oh, that piece, I need that piece to better understand my own piece of the puzzle. So I see it as a collective putting together of a puzzle that looks different from the Eurocentric puzzle we have been given of the world. And there are other diasporas. Like, Pushpa, you organized that interesting conference on diasporas, the Indian diaspora, the Irish diaspora, the African diaspora. So this intersecting sets of diasporas that met in different places on the earth. Well, that's pretty fascinating.
Yes, it is.
It makes the stories better. I mean, that little boring flat earth story, we can do better.
I do too. And I just wanted to share with you for just a moment. I know we go off the script here and there, but that's the fun of it, right? I just wanted to say that yesterday I attended a solidarity vigil, and it was in memory and commemoration of the Sikhs who were killed in Indianapolis. And it was also in commemoration with the African American men and women that we have lost, a number of them, and continue to lose, even as the case was going on for George Floyd's, and this whole sense of being thrown, out there, like we are all just Asian Americans, African Americans, Latino Americans. That's it. We are not human beings. It has created a sense of anxiety, but also a sense that we can come together and celebrate. So the vigil, Solidarity Vigil, is another example, I would say, of the kinds of ways in which we can make connections and come together of all races, people of all backgrounds and religions. So I think there is great hope in building solidarity, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. And cultures, it seems to me, is the basis of it. We're supposed to be talking about beyond races. Well, there are no races. I mean, that was a European creation of the 19th century, right? To separate people into different little boxes and say they're all different. Well, the Human Genome Project has said that is just not true at all. What we do have are all these cultural differences and connections that both unite us and separate us. But often when we start looking at what unites us with people we thought we were so separated from, we find similarities.
Absolutely, absolutely. I wanted to ask if you could share some experiences and your interpretation, because you brought up the race as a concept, but also as an experience outside of the US, particularly because I know you have traveled so much and you have lived in places where this construct differs from the way in which we think of it in the US. So if you could speak about that, and what can the US learn from other cultures and countries to honestly acknowledge the damage systemic racism has done, and how to redress the wrongdoings and begin to heal. These are big questions, but these experiences that you're talking about can help us build a sense of the pathway to it, to achieving some of these big goals.
Yeah, well, the United States with its simple binary, that is becoming a little more complex now, but it used to be, are you Black or are you white? Well, then, then there were people who had to say, well, those don't fit, so I'll just be other. But when we leave the United States, then we have to realize that it's not so simple. And I mean, given that those are fake constructs anyway, it's interesting to see how other places have constructed them differently. In Brazil, which is such a great example, Brazil, the first country of the African diaspora on the planet, has the second largest population of people of African origin after Nigeria in West Africa. And Brazil's construction of who's what is different from the United States. It's much more fluid. So I would just say, okay, well, what am I? This is what I see when I look in the mirror. And then, here it's simple, I'm Black, right? In Brazil, there's an equation. So people would look at me and then they try to figure out, So, color, hair, lips, nose, the things that identify people of African origin. But then then I'd be a morena, a brown person. Okay, so in the category of the people who define themselves as people of African origin in Brazil now, where 57% of the population says they're Black or brown. Black is a color as opposed to, and brown is a color. Okay, so those are descriptors. But then in looking at me, the person would finish the equation. Oh, but she's from the United States. She's a university professor. She has a PhD. Now, those are not characteristics, university professor, PhD. Those don't go along with Black or brown in Brazil. Plus, as a university professor, you will all laugh, I'm rich. And in Brazil, money whitens. So I'm white. As long as you know all the elements that were factored into my identity. But, that makes, at least now, currently, there is an increased desire to identify as Black or brown. And it plays out in Brazil, kind of like it plays out here, that there are privileges that go with whiteness and disadvantages that go with Blackness in Brazil, as in the United States, except they are led to believe that that's not true, or were led to believe that that's not true. So they were, as we had something very clear to fight against, they didn't. Oh, we're all just Brazilian. Yeah, but money whitens. And as a way of saying, oh, we have no racism, the rich Black person is white and the poor white person is Black. See, there's no racism. But so there is. But it does allow us to think, oh, okay, there are other ways of constructing this. Ours is not the only way. And so what's happening now, I think in Brazil, for example, is they're acquiring more of our worldview. But then in the United States, with people being able to say, well, I'm biracial or I'm this and that. Okay, it's becoming a little more realistic. This most recent attack on the person who's described as Black and Latino. What does that mean? As if those are separate categories. How many Latinos, that strange word, that all that means is that wherever you're from was colonized by Spain. How many people are Black in those places? A whole lot. So those are cast in the news in the United States as separate categories. As if this man, we're not one person. Yeah. There are a lot of Black Latinos. That means you speak Spanish or Portuguese, right?
That's very interesting. And I think we kind of show a couple of clips, I believe, if I want to show some of India or whatever. I don't know. You want to show some clips? It'll be interesting to see what we're talking about in reflected in your film. I definitely can relate to some of that because we call them dargahs. That is Pir Dargah, which is a place where both Hindus and Muslims go to worship, and also Parsis and of any faith. And there are many of those, and it's important for us to recognize and value these and to bring them to the forefront, because there is such a divisive religious divisions in India that is being fostered by different parties, political parties, or whatever you want to say. But I just feel that there is a Hajj Ali Dargah, which is very famous in near the coast of Bombay, and thousands of people go there. It's something that I just wanted to mention because Baba Gaur, of course, we know about that because part of my family is from Gujarat area, part is from the south. So I know those places. Lothal, for example, is connected to the Harappan civilization. And, these are civilizations that I was talking about, go to thousands of years before the medieval period, which is cited for when the Siddhis came. But even before that, we had so many ways in which we were connected with the African diaspora, and that is important for us to recognize. So do you want to say something about your experience of going to the dargahs?
Yeah.
Baba Gore one? Did you go to? Did you? It's in one of the most difficult places to go to, because I believe they are surrounded by leopards. It's a forested area. So I was like curious.
I do have to say, I didn't see any wild animals. And
I like National Geographic, huh?
unlike that. Yeah, for me it was, well, both of those populations claimed Barack Obama as their president. And so they saw me as sort of a representative of Barack Obama. And I said, well, what does he have to do with you? This is India, or this is Turkey. And they're like, well, look at him. He looks like us, same blood. So, looking at these folks who are unexpected faces in these places for most people, if I were in charge of education, I think it would be so much fun, because I would have two materials that would be essential: anatomy, because we're all bodies, and human geography. I would want to know about, and I think everybody should want to know about, this interesting human mosaic that's different from place to place. And that's what's interesting. The fact that people look different and eat different food and eat it in different ways, and have different musics and different dance styles and different architectures. I think that's what makes us interesting. Otherwise, we'd be really boring. And I was lucky. I had an aunt who lived in Chinatown in New York, not because she was Chinese, because it was affordable. And she, as an African American, could live in this other community of color in New York. But so I started to become an anthropologist when I was about 4. My aunt didn't have kids, she didn't have a television, so I would just look out of the window at these interesting people who, had looked different from folks in Kearney, New Jersey, had those naked ducks in the windows of those restaurants, and I wanted to know how to eat that. So I wanted to get to know some Chinese people so I could know, and all that writing, there's writing all over Chinatown, and I was learning how to read and write, and I couldn't read anything. Where's dog? Where's cat? Where's ABC? It's all different. Well, didn't I understand these people? I didn't know there were languages, I had only ever heard one. So those Chinese people in Chinatown in New York were why I wanted to know who was out there. And I certainly didn't know about the African diaspora. That was very new. I guess I learned, I learned about the Americas in the 70s. There was a conference in Colombia to which I went in 1977, and it was great. I learned about other African descendants in the Americas. And I said to a man from Ecuador, I said, I didn't know there were Black folks in Ecuador. I thought it was a country of indigenous people. And he said, dance with me, then you'll know. And the rest of the world, that whole world I looked at from Somalia, knowing I knew nothing. There was a conference in India, in Goa, in 2006 on the African diaspora in Asia. When I was invited to that, I was so excited. I almost bought a ticket for a year early. But that conference, let me know about India, and that there were different Afro-Indian populations with different stories in India of different origins in Africa. So that was pretty interesting. But then there were also people there from Turkey, from some of those Indian Ocean islands. So that just gave me a whole other part of the world with similar and different stories. And so that's what I think is fascinating about us, the humans.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that understanding the ways in which cultures around the world have kept what we call retentions of the African diaspora is is revealing, because those are things that help them not just survive, but thrive in their communities. And also, I find that maybe some of the clips that you have in the film really reveal to us how the joyfulness of some of these dances, and they communicate the human resiliency, because they did face, and I don't know how much we can document, but definitely these communities suffered in different ways in different periods of time because of racism or whatever the construction was in that place. So if we could see some clips of, I think it was from Paraguay, that really, to me, I mean, I'm speaking as a person who just enjoyed watching your films, and this one particularly struck me, the joy that is shared among people who, for some reason or the other, were marginalized in their own communities. Oh, that's beautiful. And there's one more, I think, that I'm just trying to remember the clips that were, I could talk, but do you want to comment about some of those clips that we just saw?
Yeah, one of the things, when I was putting together the documentary, one of the things I had to think about was, okay, well, what do you group together and what do you separate? And so do you group together phenomena from India or phenomena from South America, or do you put them together by theme? So as to show that there are phenomena that cross-cut that illogical geography. And so I wanted to show those two together, India and Paraguay, because both of them have saints that come from Abyssinia, Ethiopia, Northeast Africa. I wanted to make that comparative point there. And the whole issue of celebration, there are people who say, oh, these Black folks, they just want to sing and dance. And so then singing and dancing there seems to be something wrong with it. And it becomes a negative stereotype. Well, I was looking at some of my footage and found that, yes, indeed, there are a lot of places in which we do sing and dance. And is it trivial? I don't think so. There's a wonderful article by a Mukongo man he's from Congo, so he's a Congolese. He's also from the Congo Kingdom, the Ba Congo ethnic group. And he talks about Congo people in Congo Square in Louisiana during the colonial period of the United States, dancing dancing on Sundays when they were allowed to do that. And the term that the French, when it was, Louisiana, right, French, that applied to the behavior of these Africans was bamboula, which in French is an insult. It means to dance, but it also means create disorder. And it still exists and still means that, okay? But he said, well, but that's a Kikongo word in reality. And what were these Congos, when they used that term, what were they saying in Congo Square in Louisiana? Mbula, ancestors. They were saying, we are dancing so as to remember our ancestors. And he said they were colonizing African cultural space in the Americas with their rhythms. And so I find it therefore interesting that all over the place we are singing and dancing and playing instruments of African origin without getting together and saying, well, what are you gonna do? Oh, we're just gonna pray. Okay, okay, well, fine, but we're gonna dance, we're gonna party. I was at a Dugu ceremony among the Garifuna in Honduras and Central America. And the Dugu is an ancestral ceremony in which the ancestors come back to revisit their children and to encourage solidarity among their children. And what did we do? I thought, well, I'm the anthropologist, I'll just sit in the corner and watch these people. There's no role for that. You cannot sit in the corner and watch. So for 3 days, I danced for other people's ancestors, with other people's ancestors, as they danced as their ancestors. Now, how trivial is that? So all over the Americas, African descendants and elsewhere. I mean, you saw those Afro-Turks. That was a secular party, but it was a party that was about being an Afro-Turk. So all over the world, African descendants are still dancing for ancestors and recalling ancestors via dance, like in Bolivia.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that's beautifully done. And I think we kind of covered a lot of the topics we were planning to explore, and maybe the most important thing that stays with me is the importance of remembering not only that we dispersed, but that we have roots and that we can come together in that, circular manner, that we can also be influencers and be influenced, as well as create our own, roots that I kind of think is very important. I just want to say that you have indicated to me a way in which you have taken all these ideas, but the creative process that you have adopted and how you have developed, and I think in some ways nourished, is important for me to understand. And I'm sure the audience would love to hear a few words, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Well, I didn't start out knowing more than everybody else. So I was really curious, and I got to know these places in the world one by one. I saw Joseph Harris's map, so I knew about those arrows, but I didn't know how to get there. And I knew, I'm not a tourist. I want to know somebody. And in, I don't know what year, in the 90s of a previous century, there was a conference in Argentina organized by middle-class Euro-Argentinians of Yoruba religion, of course. And so I thought, well, I'm going to this conference. I thought there's got to be some African descendant from that part of the world. And when I got to the conference, those African descendants from that part of the world had not been included, but there was a fancy reception at the Palais de Glace, it was called that in French, in Buenos Aires, and I went, and it was a pretty, white environment. And I asked this is a conference on Afro culture, right? I asked one of the organizers, are there any Afro-Argentinians here? And he said, oh, yes, of course, there she is. So in this huge group, I recognized her very easily. And I went and said, you're Argentinian? She said, yes. I said, you exist? She said, I exist. So as she was the president of the oldest Afro-Argentinian group, the Casa de la Cultura Indo-Afro-Argentina, the House of Indo-African, Indo-Afro culture. And they had a conference. Well, I had to go to that. And at that conference, I met Afro-Uruguayans. And so it was cumulative. In Uruguay, they had a conference at which I met Lázaro, the Afro-Paraguayan you saw. And then, so there was a kind of a spate of conferences and things in the 90s that were essentially about the fact that these Spanish-speaking Afro-South Americans were getting organized, recognizing their specificity in their nations, because they certainly didn't get any kind of reflection from the educational system about their existence, their contributions. But each thing led to something. And when I met Juan Angola Maconde, who's got my favorite name in the Americas, whom you saw at the beginning of the Bolivia pitch, he said, I'm Juan Angola Maconde from Bolivia. We don't have any African culture. I said, Angola Maconde? How can you have two African names and no African culture? He's like, oh, there are a lot. Did you make them up? He said, no, there are a lot of Angolas, a lot of Macondes. But at that point, he didn't know much about his culture. And so when I came to Spelman and got this grant to do this project, I was able to bring together folks from all the Spanish-speaking countries in South America. And I had a previous conference in Texas at which I brought together some of them, but I couldn't bring together all of them because I didn't know anybody from Chile yet. So, and I remember that there was somebody from Chile at Spelman at the time who said, oh no, there are no Afro-Chileans. And I said, oh really? Just wait. So it's been really exciting, going to these places, meeting these people. And so it was a result of the conference in India that I wound up going to Turkey and finding all those folks. And there are more. My documentary is called A Global African Diaspora, not the, because I'm not exhaustive. I haven't been to all those people who are part of that old diaspora in Australia, for example. People who say, what? African diaspora? No. We've always been right here. The world was created right here, as a matter of fact. But when you've been to some place for 40,000, 50,000 years, you don't think you came from someplace else. You think you came from there. But, as a scholar, right? I'm aware of that the first African diaspora was human beings, some of whom, very small proportion of whom, left the continent and took their DNA around the world, that most of the DNA of all human beings is still in Africa. All those of us who are not in Africa, we have a really small amount of all the human DNA. So it's maybe I'm kind of glad I didn't learn all this, that nobody taught me all this in my fancy graduate education, because otherwise I wouldn't have this, my seeking of puzzle pieces. And I noticed that in the chat, somebody said that there are people who think that Africa is one place, one country. And, from my wanderings, I've only been to 40 or so countries in Africa. But I'm very aware that Africa is the continent with the greatest human diversity, which makes sense because that's where human beings have been for the majority of the presence of human beings on Earth. It's got the greatest human diversity and the greatest range of phenotypes, right? The tallest people, the shortest people on the planet live in Africa, over 2,000 societies, languages. So I'm very aware of the diversity. And I worked as an escort interpreter in the United States with Africans speaking French, okay? And people would compliment me on how well I spoke African. And the Africans would say, didn't matter where these Africans were from, they would say, what? Do they know so little about us? They think that we could talk African. It's like, how do you say that in Indian? How many official languages are there in India? 16 official ones with their own writing systems and a whole bunch more. So, our narrow worldview, we tend to try to impose it on others where others, they can't have such a narrow worldview because their reality is so diverse. They come in contact with people who speak other languages. I had a student from Congo, Kinshasa, in Berkeley, when I taught at the University of California, Berkeley, and his English was better than some of the United Statesians who are monolinguals. And I said, well, how did you learn such great English? He said, well, from my fifth language. I already knew this and that and that. And then I had to learn French to go to school. And then English, well, I just learned that on the way. But why did he speak several African languages already? Well, if he went to the market, everybody wasn't from his ethnic group. So if you want to buy oranges, you got to buy them in the language of somebody else. So, I think it would be so healthy for us in the United States to get a worldview as opposed to this little narrow, sense of, it's just us. And even among the us's, we don't like any kind of difference. How boring is that?
Yeah. That's right. I totally agree with you. And I think the problem, and maybe is something that I see as a problem, but the problem is that there is a lot of words thrown around, for example, diversity or even multicultural, without understanding the layers of experiential value that you bring to that concept. If you live it, you can't just bandy it around. If you know how difficult life is being diverse, you would also appreciate why you want to be diverse, in that sense. I just want to, and I think we share a lot of ways in which we think concepts are kind of, diluted. And they need to be really brought to the forefront of understanding through visual and more tactile ways. And I think that's where I get that your filmmaking, and I love filmmaking, you know, if I could have done another field, that would have been one of them. My daughter is doing it now in my place. So we live through our children, right? Sometimes we do. I just wanted to see what questions there are. I think you answered one of the questions there that was about the limits of treating Africa as one entity. I think you very clearly showed, of course, that is the problem. If you see it as a person who just studies African cultures, they tend to put everything as one homogeneous group. But if you live it, if you experience it, if you travel and you write and work with people, I think you gain a deeper understanding. There is another question here, and I want to see if there is time, it says, but I think we have time. Many students are limited in their ability to travel abroad or to have global experience. What would you recommend for educators who want their students to be exposed to different cultures and to learn about the world?
You know, we tend to think that you have to be rich to travel. Let me say that I was not rich. That was not how I got to travel. I owed money after my first trip to Cameroon. I paid it when I was in graduate school or after graduate school. I think educational institutions have a job here. I think that to be educated, you really need to go someplace else. You need to get out of your little comfort zone where you know the rules and where you know how to be polite, and go to someplace where you don't know the rules and you've got to figure it out. Now, you don't really have to go beyond the borders, but it's good. Because then, you know, you're in a different kind of environment. I went to Cameroon for my first experience, a small town in the interior of Cameroon, just happened to be capital of a kingdom with a king and a palace and such. But that's the first time I was faced with the fact that I didn't know how to be polite. I didn't know the rules of eating, for example. I didn't know the rules of hospitality, for example. So I acted like a barbarian. I was invited to eat by someone and I said, no, thank you. So you think my food's not good enough for you, huh? And then hearing that in Africa, I heard that in my own community. You know, you think you're too good for my food. So you know, so there was both the difference and the recognition of similarity. And so I do think that educational institutions ought to make it possible, maybe required, for students to go to another country. I mean, that's how you have a real education. And ideally one that doesn't speak English, so that you've got to learn how to express yourself in somebody else's language. I went to an archaic college that had 2 language requirements. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. And, you know, once you know 2, you know, well, you might as well add another one. And then you are so aware that it's up to you to make the effort. The idea that, oh, well, you know, they all speak English. Even if they do, and they don't by and large, okay? But even if they do, why should they have to speak English to speak to you? I found that, even, you know, with my best efforts at speaking other people's languages, you know, not great, but even if you just know a little bit, people like you because you're making an effort to approach them. You're not saying, hey, I came to your country, now you make an effort to talk to me. I'm the one with the dollars.
That's a great way to undercut this idea of exceptionalism that oftentimes, you know, we know what is it called? The ugly American, when as a tourist wants to demand everything. I understand totally what you're talking about. Let me see if there are more questions. That was a great question and you responded so well. We'll see here. Okay, I think that's about what I saw. I think Dr. Tagunde from Spelman is asking, can Dr. Walker shed more light on how the differences in historical experiences and socioeconomic mobility create tension and prejudice between African immigrants and African Americans?
Ooh. Well, now let me begin by saying I started the day today seeing a wonderful film, and that's called something like An African Princess in the Bronx. Okay, about a young woman whose parents were migrants from Ghana to the Bronx. And her father had to go home because he had to go home and be the chief of his village. And so she, being 17, was mad at her mother and said, well, I'll go see my father then, and I'll be a princess. And so she goes to Ghana. And she doesn't like everything there either because she's 17. And she says to somebody, I want to go home. And the Ghanaian says, well, maybe this is home. Oh, how nice to have more than one home, and how nice to have some roots and to know about them. Now, African Americans in Africa, that's a long, complex story, right? We in the United States had been told that we had no culture, we had no African roots, and that was just gospel. And that clearly, we knew Africa because we knew Tarzan, and Africa was primitive and Africa was an embarrassment. And so we certainly didn't want those roots until Alex Haley gave us roots in the 70s and told us that we could have roots, we could even know them, and that it was in our interest to want to know them. That was really the beginning. I mean, it's not that prior there had not been returns to Africa, beginning with the returns to Sierra Leone in the 1700s, Paul Cuffey, and then especially the Garvey movement that was about a return to Africa. It didn't really, most people didn't actually get there, but Black Star Square in Ghana is all about the Garvey movement. So there have been people who have understood the virtue of having roots. And there have been all these symbolic references to our roots. Ethiopia was symbolic. Ethiopia was also real. When Italy attacked Ethiopia, there were African Americans who went to fight on the side of Ethiopia and to teach in Ethiopia. So there are, and we have these allusions to Africa. The African Methodist Episcopal Church was called that at the beginning of the 1800s. So until like the mid 1800s, there were a lot of African American institutions that were called Africa Free School, the Africa Literary Society or something like that. That's not exactly it. But then the people who were in control of the society who said, okay, you all can be free, sort of, but you got to leave. And so they created the American Colonization Society to send these people born in the United States back to an Africa they'd never been to. Okay, and so that was when Africa ceased to be part of our nomenclature. Because folks who didn't want to go back said, okay, well, we're going to be Negroes, American Negroes, as a matter of fact. So we're going to identify as American, which was important for sticking around. And but so there's always been, there have always been two tendencies. I ain't left nothing, no Africa. I'm from Mississippi, and we're Africans. So a lot of it is about knowledge. So Africa was colonized, and Africa was not given any kind of favorable impressions of African Americans either, right? Well, that was a two-pronged thing. We were to be aspired to be like, but then we were also said to be criminals, drug addicts and stuff. So Africa's primitive, we're poor and criminals. Now that's somebody else's effort to keep us divided. I was formally taught that I had no culture, and how could I find out about my culture? I went to Africa, and I saw elements of familiarity. Nicolas Guillen, Afro-Cuban poet, as the refrain of one of his poems said, without knowing each other, we will recognize each other. Well, I did. And from recognizing elements of my own culture from East Orange, New Jersey, I'm not from someplace deeply African, like the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia, rural Mississippi. No, I'm from a city in the north, where my father had no idea that he was using Wolof words like hip, cat. Those are Wolof words, okay? The introduction to the book I edited, African Roots, American Cultures, Africa and the Creation of the Americas, the introduction is, are you hip? Wolof word. To the jive, Wolof word. I learned both of those in Kearney, New Jersey, without knowing. I went to school with people named Ouida, place in Benin. Cuff, Kofi, male born on Friday in the Akan language, like the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. We know he was born on a Friday because that's what his name tells us. And then, once I went outside of the United States, elsewhere in the Americas, the Africanisms are just flagrant. I wondered about those women getting happy in churches in the United States. Oh, it's the spirit. I wanted to know, what's the spirit? Why does spirit act like that? Where does spirit come from? What's spirit's name? When I went to a candomblé ceremony in Bahia, nobody needed to give me any explanation. I saw it. I got it. I understood the body language of it. We didn't have any African ancestors, right? Everybody had that Indian, Native American grandmother or great grandmother, long straight hair all the way down her back, could sit on it. I knew my great grandmother. Yes, she did have long wavy hair, but I knew Indians also from television, and clearly, she didn't live in a teepee. She didn't have a horse, so she wasn't that Indian. Well, in Colombia, I found that there's a place on the Pacific coast that has where people have all these African last names. Lukumi, Karabali, Mandinga, Casaman, Luango, Okoro. And when you ask them about their names, they'll tell you, oh, it's pure Castilian Spain, because they don't know, right? Well, thanks to them, I found out that my great-grandmother, the Indian, her name was Congo. So I have a bunch of relatives named Congo. So what I think now with respect to Africans and African Americans, we have all been colonized. Bob Marley, quoting Marcus Garvey, said, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." So, we need to get beyond what we've been taught about Africans, and Africans need to get beyond what they've been taught about us, because if Africans don't understand us in the diaspora, they don't understand Africa. They don't understand what happened to Africa. And if we don't understand Africans in Africa, then we don't understand our own behavior. Why do I eat black-eyed peas on New Year's? I had to go to Brazil and Senegal to get a reasonable answer to why is that our good luck food. In Brazil, it's a spiritual exchange. In Senegal, niebe, black-eyed peas, represent abundance, partially because they grow during a drought and they refertilize the soil by transferring nitrogen. So there's so much for us to learn. Why do white folks in the south of the United States eat black-eyed peas for New Year's? For luck, they know that, just like we know that, but do they know why? Just like we mostly don't know why. So many of our whys, and the us I'm talking about now is African diasporans from Chile to Canada. So many of the answers to our why do I do this come from Africa. And if we don't know about Africa, we don't understand our own whys.
Beautifully said. I love to listen to you, so I get mesmerized. But there's one more question, I think, a couple of questions that I'm just going to pick something that I can see here. Dr. Dorian Brown Cosby from Spelman had asked you if you, in your travels, can you discuss some of your personal or gender-specific connections to the African-descended women you encountered?
Wow. Well, one of the interesting issues in the Americas is the power of African-descended women. I was asked to give a talk in Bahia in Brazil on femicide. And I said, I'll give a talk, but not on femicide. I don't do negatives. So why don't I just give a talk on empowered women, okay? And let me just start at the beginning. I liked it when our ancestress, the oldest fossil was Lucy, known as Dinkanesh in Ethiopia. I liked when the early man was a woman. Well, she's not the oldest anymore, but I still like her because I have photos of her. I don't have photos of the others because like the oldest man, Sahelanthropus chadensis, he's little pieces. Lucy, she's standing there in the museum in Addis Ababa, so you could take her picture. So I always start with Lucy. But then if we think about in Brazil, where religion of African origin is so widespread and so strong and so part of everybody's life. Well, the Yoruba religion in Bahia is characterized by priestesses. The 3 oldest houses are run by women, and it's inconceivable that they not be run by women. I mean, nobody would even, it wouldn't occur to anybody to think that. In addition, throughout Brazil, there are these Congos, congadas, they're called, and they're a continuum of the Kingdom of Congo. Well, who's important in that? The queen. The queens are perpetual. The kings are festive in that you may be king for a year, which means you get to finance the festivities. But the queen is perpetual. So that women, wealth in Brazil, in a place like Minas Gerais, where Minas Gerais, golden General Mines, that was the center of the Brazilian gold rush. Women made a lot of money in the gold, in that gold culture. One of the things they did was sell cooked food in the street. So the men, miners, got to pay them in gold. Those women financed hotels. They financed brotherhoods and sisterhoods. They financed churches. So African women acquired a lot of power in an unequal society, of course, but power in the Americas. And some of those traditions are really Pan-African traditions. And if you look at in West Africa, for example, in the markets in Accra and in Nigeria, Benin, Togo, there are women who in French are called Mama Benz. Why Benz? Mercedes Benz, because these women, they're not necessarily literate in some European language, but they can count. And there was a story about market women in Lagos in Nigeria. They were bothered that the market was not clean, and they went to the city council of men and said, could you clean up the market, please? Oh, yes, we'll soon come, we'll do that. And the women went back and the market was still dirty, and they said, could you clean up? Yeah. And then they went back again and they said, do you want to eat? We control the distribution of food, okay? So you just see us as these women sitting there in the market. We control the distribution of food, clean it up. And it was clean. So, we in this patriarchal society see something abnormal about women acquiring this kind of power. Why? Why can't we look at it from the other side and think, yeah, well, this is reasonable. So it was really nice being in these places where, of course, the priestess is going to be a woman. And is going to be in control. And it occurs to me that the professor who asked me the question about Africans and African Americans may have something to contribute from an African side.
Yeah. That's a whole other conference that we could have, right? But this is great. This is wonderful. There's one question. I think it's already been answered. Somebody, Christy Flat asked, why do Southerners eat black-eyed peas on New Year's? And you already responded in some senses, but New Year's specifically, is there something?
Well, at the beginning of the new year, a renewal. And I was always curious about that. I mean, I knew that my family, we ate black-eyed peas for luck. And it's to start the new year right. Why white Southerners? Because they were influenced by African Americans, maybe by their cooks. I've heard that version of the story, but maybe also by virtue of the fact that that was a society they lived in. And one of the things that it's useful to know about the United States is the Africanisms of everybody. When I taught at the University of Texas, I always taught about the African diaspora because that's what I know about. And at the University of Texas, by definition, most of my students were not African descendants. And so I had students, white students, who would come to me and say, I was taking this class, I have blonde hair and blue eyes, and I use those African words you talked about every day. I also say, wow. And if the person were from Louisiana, oh, please, eating a dish that has a redundantly African name, like okra gumbo. Both of those words are African. Okuru, Nkrumah, from the Akan language family of Ghana and Ivory Coast. Ngombo from the Bantu-speaking folks of Central Africa. I imagine two African women around a pot, woman from Central Africa, woman from West Africa, saying, what do you call this thing? Oh, we call it okra. We call it gumbo. Okay, let's make some okra gumbo. And so the United States government, when I was being told officially that we, US African Americans, had no culture, period, not no African culture, no culture. And at the same time, the United States government, beginning in 1956 under President Eisenhower, hardly a flaming liberal, they instituted this policy of what they called cultural diplomacy, sending the high culture of the United States around the world. What was it? Jazz. There's a book called Satchmo Blows Up the World with his jazz. And on that level, it's, you know, we talked about, you know, we are talking about us and the rest of the world. It's really, I mean, we are very involved with seeing our influence on the rest of the world, but looking at Atlanta as a place of the civil right, a high point, a high spot of the civil rights movement, it's useful to look at the rest of the world and their impact on us. Like for the civil rights movement, for example, as the United States is saying, hey, we're the paragons of democracy, and the other folks in the world were saying, yeah, but aren't you, you know, what about that thing you all call segregation? And other countries in the world were attacking the segregationist policies of the United States, saying, yeah, you tell us what to do. Well, look at your own house first. And when Guinea wanted to join the United Nations in 1958, the French, putting pressure on the United States, said, no, don't let them do that. The United States Secretary of State, I don't remember who it was at that point, doesn't matter. What he said was, we can't do that. We can't have Little Rock, Arkansas, and as a way of representing the United States with all that violence against African Americans, all that televised violence, and deny an African country admission to the United Nations.
Awesome. I think we have covered most of the questions. I think there are some comments that I'm sure you'll get to see, and they're beautiful comments. I think we are coming to the close of the program. So I'll say thank you to you for this engaging conversation. You know, I could sit with you and chat forever, but we have to respect time, as it is a part of our, you know, both of us share this sense of time being limitless, right? We constructed time. So, but I appreciate, I don't want the people here to panic and think we're going to sit here forever. So thank you. And I'm blowing a kiss to you because I can't hug you.
Yeah.
I want to say, I really love talking with you, engaging with you. We had you over, we could do it one-to-one. Maybe we'll do it too soon.
Hope so. Look forward to that.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending this wonderful panel, keynote speech, actually. It was supposed to be, it ended up question and answer format, but you are just something that I just think is a treasure to me. I don't want to say something, but it's a treasure. You are a treasure, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. And I just want to say goodbye to everybody. I think there is going to be a follow-up.
Excuse me, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Pushpa, and Sheila, thank you as well. On behalf of the Atlanta Global Study Center, the team at Georgia State, who's been putting together the Global Studies Symposium this year, and to all collaborators in the Race Beyond Borders initiative. So thrilled to have had this opportunity to be with you on a Friday afternoon. We look forward to being back with more programming and conversations in the Race Beyond Borders initiative, and also to share with you that the dates for the Atlanta Global Studies Center Symposium, the next one will be in November 17 and 18. So to be continued. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Shebnam. Thank you, everyone who's been involved, and wishing everybody a a great weekend. Thank you.